Broken wing or crushed wing can be a really effective pose to help your students open up the chest. However, it is a very forceful pose on said area. Now, if you're invested as a yoga teacher with helping your students build more joint stability, more mobility, more strength, coupled with the lengthening and the flexibility component, then I'm going to share with you some tips that you can use to either prepare your students for the forceful nature of broken wing, and this will include before the pose, during the pose, and after the pose, and also some things that you can teach them in place of broken wing, particularly if you want to focus on, again, joint stability and mobility and not forceful flexibility on the body. So when your students are getting into a pose like this, we typically set it up with just arm out to the side, either arm straight or elbow bent. One hand presses down, and then we press and we lean over like this. Now, again, this is very forceful on the body, and a way that you can get your students to test this, or you can test this yourself, is that when you go over into this type of pose, are you able to actually take weight off of this arm? I can't. I have to come out of this, and that's where I'm able to take weight off. So that just shows me that I am forcing my body into a position it is not able to achieve without force. This is where you create joint instability, and the body is also just not able to structurally support my shoulder joint in that position. So it's not super sustainable in the long run, nor is it very accessible or respectful of the body and its biomechanics. So here's what you can get your students to do instead. Get them to explore what I like to call yoga swimming. Now you can have them, again, with the head turned and this hand down. I'm just going to do it like this for demonstration purposes. And this arm can be lifted up. And I get them to explore, how does it feel when your arm is straight? How does it feel when your elbow is bent? How does it feel when your arm reaches forward? How does it feel when the arm reaches back? Do a little bit of yoga swimming, moving that arm around, playing around with having the arm bent, the arm straight. You can see I'm turning the palm in different directions, and you're just getting your students to play around with different variables of this arm. And what this is doing is it is utilizing the muscles through the upper back on this side, which will then speak to the lengthening of the tissues on the opposing side, and that is where we're trying to stretch. So the way the body works biomechanically is that if you strengthen and activate and engage one area of the body, it will naturally speak to the willing lengthening of the tissues on the opposing area of the body. So that's why that yoga swimming can work really well to create the effect of opening up through the chest. Now, that's one thing that you can get them to do. And again, the head can be down or it can be turned. Now, the other thing that you can get them to do is start to play around with entering into a broken or crushed wing. So I'll get my students to hover here, and then I'll get them to start to turn the head and lift the opposite leg up in the air. Then from here, they're going to start to bend into the knee, kick the heel to the bum, and start to rotate around. And then they're going into, again, some yoga swimming in the same way. Now they can oscillate here. They can roll to the hips and then roll to the side again. Roll and become a little bit more neutral. Maybe the elbow is bent, and then they can pull the elbow as they come into that twist. I also like to instruct them maybe to straighten the back leg, especially for contrast of having that knee bent, and then they can move, and you might even get them to lightly tap. They're not grabbing, pulling, they're just noticing where those 2 points might draw near one another. And then they can come back and just move through different little things like this. Now, those are ways that you can help to prepare the body for the forceful nature of a broken wing or crushed wing. And when you get your students to exit out of it, get them to come back into that hovered position so that they work again on the joint stability. Now, if you want to get them to move into more of that what's known as a broken wing or a crushed wing, get them to hover that arm for as long as possible before they go into passivity. Or again, they do not have to go into being passive at all. So you can get them to hover, leg lifts, knee bends, hover that arm for as long as they possibly can before they then let it land and open up. And when they come out, you're going to get them to go back to hovering and then in a controlled manner, lowering all the way down here. That's one option. Or else they're not going into the passive movement at all. They're lifting, they're raising, and maybe they're continuing to explore and find movement here. Maybe they're just holding. Maybe there's little pulses of the arm, and they're not ever going into passive flexibility. Now, these are really great tools to be able to incorporate into your classes so that your students have options that align with them and what it is that they feel that they want to explore. This approach is so much more nourishing for the body. It's much more sustainable, it's much more accessible, and it is just more loving and respectful to honor the body's biomechanics. We do not need to constantly guide our students to force their flexibility in order for the body to get lengthened, to stretch. Again, those muscles on the upper back there, when we activated them against gravity, that naturally creates the release through here. And in fact, it is a much more supportive way to approach flexibility because you have the activation that's creating the release as opposed to forcing the body into a position. So try these in your next class if you are guiding and instructing broken or crushed wing. And for more teaching tips like this, make sure you subscribe to my channel.